Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our virtual conference series, Reimagine 2020. This is version 2.0, Disrupting the System, and I'm your co-host, Ashlie Meredith, Head of Education at MouseBelt Blockchain Accelerator. Today, I'm interviewing a returning guest, Rachel Siegel of Crypto Finally. If you didn't catch it before, head on over to our YouTube channel and see our first interview with Rachel. Thank you so much for coming on again. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I am out in New York City right now, hence my not so great camera setup, but I am excited to be talking to you guys again. I was excited about your first conference as well.
Yeah, did you catch some of the interviews? Were there any favorites of yours?
I did. Honestly, I was skimming through all of them. So you guys were doing about like 12 hours of interviews, right?
We did a live stream of 72 hours of content that we dropped all at once.
No, I thought it was great. Honestly, I thought it was great, and your distribution was great too to get people involved. But yeah, I did watch some of them. I'm not remembering the exact names because I think I was in and out for those 72 hours. I kept clicking.
Yeah, we kind of did the Netflix model of like drop a whole season of content all at once for people to binge while they're stuck at home. Yeah, and actually, I'd love to talk to you more about, the format and content and distribution because you're a content creator yourself. Rachel is a vocal advocate and a speaker for the blockchain space, and you specifically focus on demographic expansion and increasing mass adoption of blockchain and looking at consumer culture. So one of the things that you say is that, community is the catalyst for growth and adoption. And I'm wondering if you see any parallels to how the crypto space is approaching mass adoption or how this community is growing to other niche industries or emerging technologies, or is this pretty unique the way that the crypto community is growing?
Well, I will be completely honest. I do not observe any other communities except for the crypto community. So in comparison, it's a little bit of a hard bet. But looking at the crypto community, especially even in the time that I've been around, Crypto Finally is fairly new, as of November 2018. So I'm about less than 2 years old right now. Um, I've been watching the space change, honestly, and seeing more people get involved. I think that we are headed in a really good direction. It's just a matter of making this content accessible, so for me, when I talk about demographic expansion, when I talk about getting the community involved as a catalyst, it has to do with accessibility. So I know that a lot of the content that's out there about blockchain and cryptocurrency uses very dense technological jargon. I mean, at all times, it's hard for an everyday consumer to get involved in. So my goal is simplifying. So always simplifying what is blockchain technology, what is cryptocurrency, what is Bitcoin, and how is it that it can benefit you. I think a lot of information gets lost in translation in our community. I think that there is a lot of pertinent information that, if explained in lesser words, could probably make a bigger impact. So I think that having these conversations and starting to acknowledge this situation where we do need to get a more baseline consumer audience involved in cryptocurrency to reach adoption, I think that that's going to make a major difference when it comes to the future of where we are with Bitcoin and blockchain. But I have been seeing that growth. I even 2 years ago, I mean, I was one of the only girls who was active on crypto Twitter, right? There were like the original OG girls who have been around in the space. But I was one of the first new ones in this new wave. And now we're seeing like all these other women coming out and starting brands in cryptocurrency, getting involved in blockchain. And I'm just loving to watch that story arc, even in 2 years' time, to watch just the perception of what it means to be in cryptocurrency start to change.
Yeah, I think yours and my experience might be pretty similar as far as entering into the crypto space kind of after the last big bull run, right? I kind of got in 2018 to help build this university program for our accelerator. We wanted to invest in student projects. We knew there's a lot of innovation and interest in blockchain at universities. And what I found was that there's a huge demand for this information from students. Mm-hmm. And legacy institutions like the academy are slow to adopt, slow to change policies. It can take up to 5 years to get an accredited course, into the curriculum. So we really wanted to support students who were doing all this grassroots work to build the crypto community. But yeah, I've been around for the last 2 years, came from more traditional. I know you came from mainstream media. I did theater and production a lot as well, but eventually got a master's degree in philosophy. So I was teaching university courses, and I'm just so interested in education, open access, educational resources, how blockchain can help people, prove that they have certain learning experiences, expedited background checks. There's all sorts of great use cases there. But yeah, definitely big advocate over at MouseBelt as well for curating all this content, because there's just so much out there, and like you said, a lot of it gets lost in translation. So trying to distill it down for people, create educational resources and make them free. This whole conference, everything that we're doing here is just goodwill for our community to really highlight the cool projects and advocates like yourself and what they're doing in the space. Also, to inspire students that this is a real industry. People are making their careers here, and they can do it too. And they don't have to be technical. And I think that's what's great about people like you and I talking, who come from like maybe a humanities background, not technical at all, but are able to communicate or understand the importance of communication in driving an emerging technology. So kind of leads me to my next question about how your experience in mainstream media has helped you, and those lessons about communicating that you've been able to use in your blockchain career.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I don't think I ever did anything before cryptocurrency that could have prepared me for like cryptocurrency, right? So I was in mainstream production for a long time. I worked for the Blue Man Group for 3 years at HPE, Weight Watchers, Lion King, Wicked. So those are all commercial theatrical productions. And it really sort of got me in tune with the process of production. I would say that that was the greatest asset that I took from there. Communication, obviously, that's working in teams and team building. Any righteous human being should probably learn that at some point. But it was primarily just the operations angle for me, which really helped me start creating my content. So when I first jumped out of the door with Crypto Finally, I was making these Bitcoin related music videos. And the Bitcoin music videos were really rooted in that background that I had. That was theater, that was production, that was about the animations and the music. So for me, that I think was the closest correlation to that part of my life. I was also a substitute teacher for a long time. So in New York City public schools, I taught K through 12 and District 75, which is special education. So children with varying degrees of autism, Down syndrome. And I would tell you that job, substitute teaching, definitely prepared me more for blockchain, in my opinion, than necessarily the production angle. If you can talk to a room full of 30 children and get them to listen, like you can talk to some people on a live stream, so that really made a difference to me in being able to, if you're asking about communication and being able to create a language that people outside of myself can understand, right? So working with children's a great example of that, because you can't necessarily give them, full on what it is that your thoughts are. You need to think about your language. You need to think about your juxtaposition in the way that you're speaking and the way that you're presenting to them. So I think that really played into sort of what I tackle here in the space, which is a curve of understanding as opposed to just a curve of learning, which in my opinion is saying to people, hey, you can get involved in this. It's not just that people need to hear about Bitcoin, it's that they need to understand that they can do it. So in that way, I think that it was really fundamental for me, even in just knowing that that's a reality, that not everybody who doesn't have Bitcoin doesn't want to get in Bitcoin. It doesn't mean that they've never heard of it. A fair group, like a large majority of those people, have heard about Bitcoin, but just don't believe there's a way for them to get involved. It's too difficult for them. And that brings us like all the way back to the language and the way that we portray ourselves. So in that sense, I think my background really has helped with crypto and blockchain.
Yeah, and in terms of language, it's not even just about the words you use, or quote unquote dumbing something down, or using non-technical terms to explain blockchain to someone. A language that someone can understand is when you're talking to them about something they care about. And I know part of your demographic expansion is talking specifically about millennial audiences and what they care about. What do you think that audience cares about, and are people in blockchain communicating to them well? Is there some tips that you would give companies looking to get more millennials involved in blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's fundamentally rooted in the language and the technical jargon. Like, I will say that. I think there are a lot of millennials who are swayed by the idea of cryptocurrency, but it is difficult and it's droning to sit there and listen to someone talk about the technicalities of it, and it makes you second guess your ability. As far as inclusion of millennial audiences, I think that a really big push for cryptocurrency and blockchain technology would be the fact that a lot of millennials have been stuck in the gig economy. And this is something that I speak on a lot, is that we were hit with a gig economy. All of a sudden, there were no jobs. I don't care what boomers watching this right now convinced there were jobs. There were no jobs. No, everyone was working in the gig economy, and it's very, very tough, honestly. And it was tough for this entire generation of millennials. So with cryptocurrency and blockchain, I think it's really providing opportunity for a lot of younger people to start in their own jurisdiction on their way up, right? So this is an emerging market that people can get involved in on their own. And I think it does give people that opportunity to do what they want to do. People are creating companies, people are creating business, people are building together in a way that they weren't feeling as though the gig economy was their only way out.
So it's really awesome to learn that you also worked with younger people as well as a substitute teacher. Do you have any thoughts about bringing blockchain education or content to even younger generations than millennials, high schoolers, middle schoolers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I genuinely believe that they're the next wave, right? So I think it's up to a little bit of the older audience to create palpable technology with good UI, good UX, and good distribution that that next younger wave can get involved in. Um, I think that that's what they're really looking for when it comes to the translation of technology and generationally, right? We are here breaking out of this gig economy. We're here building the groundwork for a much larger industry. And I think that those younger people, you know, the middle schoolers, the elementary school kids, kids who are babies now, and, you know, 10 years they're going to grow up and suddenly be utilizing blockchain technology. I think that that phase is going to have to be what's under the table. That's when we're really using the products that utilize cryptocurrency and blockchain, but they don't really know what's going on. And in my opinion, I think that's the next wave for the younger generation. I think that this age group right now, what we're looking at, millennials, maybe the tip of Gen Z, I think this is the final wave for when it comes to actually talking about this technology and sharing with a younger audience. I think that the next generation after us are just going to be using cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. I don't think that it's going to be any part of their minds that crypto or blockchain is drastically different from what they know. I think it's going to be what they do know. So it's just going to be a bit of a different approach when it comes to getting them involved. You know, I think we can put information about blockchain in front of them. We can tell them about cryptocurrency, but I think at the end of the day, when we look at those much younger audiences, and honestly, like the kids of the future, right? So they're going to be, God, like 20 years from now, who knows what's going to be going on with cryptocurrency and blockchain. But I do believe that the real angle for them would be creating products that actually work, creating products that they can actually use, and not focusing on the crypto or blockchain end.
Yeah, that having the user interface and experience where the blockchain tech kind of disappears behind the background, and this is just an everyday thing that we all use. And you know, I think we see a lot of stuff in esports and gaming and NFTs, and it seems like younger people are really primed to understand how they might be able to like earn some kind of token, right? Token economies make a lot of sense to gamers. You know, they're used to like using in-game assets to like get what they want out of them. You know, I used to teach philosophy to high schoolers and media literacy to middle school girls, and I think that's where the education could kind of start, which is just more knowledge about how social media works and influences them, what money actually is. As a philosopher, I have really loved talking about crypto to new people, because to really start the conversation, it's actually a philosophical question. You have to ask them like, what is money? And then you realize that people don't really understand what fiat is, or the fact that gold, the dollar isn't backed by gold anymore, and they really start to rethink their understanding of like, okay, so we started with bartering as humans, and then we needed this thing to like represent value, and then they see where those problems can come in that blockchain solves, like removing middlemen and the ledger, right? So I think conversations like that, high school and middle school students are totally capable of and interested in. And I think educating them on, just financial literacy to start, like understanding money, finances, so that when they go to create their own finances, they understand like the benefits or pitfalls of a cryptocurrency solution.
Yeah.
So as someone who spends a lot of time on social media, content creating, I do as well. We had a fun debate with our students last week about whether the Twitter hack was good or bad for Bitcoin. I'm wondering if you saw any of the reporting on that or have any opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I was following that from before it took off. Literally, the second that CZ and Binance got their accounts taken, I was on it. But I don't honestly think that it has a big impact. I'll be honest, when it first happened, everyone thought it was going to be bad for Bitcoin. So the Twitter hack that you're talking about, initially when it rolled out, first it took CZ Binance's account, then it took Binance, then it took Gemini, Kraken, KuCoin, Coinbase, then it started hitting Satoshi Light, Justin Sun, Tron Foundation, and it started rooted in the crypto community. Obviously, we know then it branched out. Obama, Biden, Kanye West, Bezos, they all got their Twitter accounts taken too. They were putting out this scam, basically a Bitcoin X for XX scam. I personally think that it's not incredibly impactful. I think that the idea of Bitcoin being nefarious is long rooted. I think that people already sort of believe that in the back of their minds, and that this kind of thing, I don't believe it was going to sway people who didn't already think that. I think it was just an example of something else happening. Now, that being said, I know when it came out, when the hack happened, everyone was losing it. Everyone's like, oh, nobody's going to like Bitcoin anymore. Like, of course they're not. Now we're all criminals again. But 1 week later was when the OCC approved custody of crypto assets in banks, right? So it only took 1 week after that scam for the banks to come out and say now they're custodying crypto, which to me just shows like the lack of importance of something as small as that scam. You know, we were all concerned about it because we exist on crypto Twitter. We're in that echo chamber of crypto Twitter, right? So it's so overwhelming for us, and we're watching this Bitcoin scam take off because we live on the Twitter. But in a larger perspective, it really just, I don't think it was as big and bad as we felt like it was, just because it was so close to home with our community. You know, the fact that the banks came out custodying crypto only 1 week later said something really large to me, and that they're not necessarily getting caught up on these little moments.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point, because one thing about even though it's a scammer coming out and saying what was the currency that they asked for, it was Bitcoin. That proves that necessarily this thing has value. And then a week later, the banks are saying this is an asset, this is valuable, this is something that we can be custodians for. So yeah, that's one big thing that came out of it, is this scammer announcing all across the world and on hundreds of profiles that Bitcoin has some sort of value, or they wouldn't be asking for it, right? I thought it was a great example of Bitcoin's transparency. They were able to track down the source of it really fast, and if anybody is concerned, and hopefully, by communicating these things in an interview like this, or with my students in a little debate, is that when their friends who aren't familiar with cryptocurrency ask about it and say, hey, I heard about that Bitcoin thing, isn't it only for scammers? We like, actually, it's a really terrible coin for criminals. It's completely traceable. So that's one point as well. And then I'm hoping that also it starts conversations about the pitfalls of like centralized social media. And as someone on a lot of different platforms and who kind of relies on social media for their business, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on Web 2.0 platforms, any blockchain solutions that you are hopeful about or even use that are, censorship resistant blockchain social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of owning your own content is really important, right? So as soon as you put something on YouTube, it belongs to YouTube. Technically, you got a YouTube copyright, but they're allowed to do with it whatever they choose. And we've seen a lot of that in cryptocurrency. Creators being banned, creators being ripped and removed, just for talking about Bitcoin. So it is a really important industry to be able to utilize free speech, censorship resistance, and ownership of content. For me, that ownership, I think, is the biggest part. My content remains mine, and there's proof that it's my content. I personally use a Library. I think that Library is a great video hosting platform that exists on blockchain technology. I think that there are some questions to be brought up when we're talking about Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 when it comes to jurisdiction and safety. So I think that these are questions that are going to need to be tackled. And I think that we're going to come up on that. And I've asked this is like an offshoot question, but like just for people at home who are thinking about Web 2.0, Web 3.0, talking about censorship resistance, talking about owning your own content. What do we do when nefarious acts start taking place on these blockchains? What do we do to make sure that people are safe? And just like the normal sort of cyber crime that you might see. And I asked this question openly on Twitter, to which nobody was actually able to give me a great front end solution. We're talking about layered solutions, right? Never can you actually fix this on the blockchain. You can only fix it on the second front end. I'm asking questions about, what about situations where someone else's content was stolen? What about situations, victims of trafficking, and the way that, we have seen this sort of nefarious activity happen on the internet in the past? What happens when this stuff starts going on the blockchain? What happens with children? What happens with underage people who might be involved in some of this stuff? And what does it mean for that permanence to exist? How can we tackle it? So I love the technology, I really do. But I think that there are going to be questions like that must be answered before it can hit an adoptive stage, because I can see it going wrong. And I'm a big advocate for it. And the people who are able to answer those questions for me are going to be the people that I support. Not enough tech nerds are thinking about the human beings that are going to be using Web 2.0 and Web 3.0. And I think that it's really important, going back to the community, going back to the way that we behave and our perceptions, to acknowledge human behavior as well. Yes, censorship resistance is amazing. Yes, owning your own content is amazing. There shouldn't be the ability to rip it, but what about real situations where it needs to be taken down? What are the tactics for that? So I'm out here asking questions to the decentralized communities about how they're going to handle situations like this. And I do think it's important to look at. I think that people aren't looking enough at it. I think we might be a little overexcited about blockchain technology, and we're not thinking about the negative ramifications that could possibly happen.
Yeah, and it's a question of like ethics and human behavior, which just goes more to the point of, we need everyone involved in the development of this technology. We need philosophers, we need psychologists, we need people who can communicate the costs and benefits of different solutions. I was just listening to a podcast series you probably enjoy called Rabbit Hole from the Times, and they are going into just how different social media companies handle these kind of echo chambers. And they talk about YouTube's first move to what they called responsibility for their platform, which was, they had their algorithms running on watch time and recommendations, all of the AI that they were using. And then there was a shooting or a disaster, a natural disaster, that they wanted to put on the front page of YouTube, because they said, we have a responsibility to make sure people are getting this information, even if they don't want to watch it and they don't click on it. And that, it was a couple of years ago, it was the first time they said, actually, as a platform, we have a responsibility to inform, to keep people safe. So whether these different platforms have a sense of responsibility, I'm not sure, but I would love to talk to them and hear from them about that too.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I just think that these kinds of questions aren't necessarily being asked, right? We're wondering about that 2.0, that 3.0. What does it mean to own your own content? But I do think that there should be some sort of method in place, not necessarily to police people, not to prevent censorship resistance, but to prevent crimes, to prevent crimes from taking place and to prevent the permanence of crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you, Rachel, for asking the hard questions and being out there talking about this important stuff. Speaking of like social media apps that are on the blockchain, I'm always curious to ask people, are there any non-wallet or non-exchange blockchain apps that you actually use, like on your phone or on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, I use, CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, those are not necessarily interface. Those are just to like look at crypto prices. I use some gaming apps, right? So some crypto-based gaming apps. Aircoins is one that's fun. It's augmented reality, and you can like catch crypto coins the same way you would Pokemon Go. That's just a fun one. But yeah, for the most part, honestly, like my crypto experience is going on my computer. As far as exchanges, apps, it's mostly gaming and wallets. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I'm just kind of interested in people who've been in the space for a few years, and I'll answer. You know, I only have one. It's called Sense Chat. It's on the EOS platform, and that's just because I got into that community learning more about EOS, and I hardly use it, but uh, just curious as far as adoption, how many people are actually using blockchain applications, and is there actually a use for them? Um, Granted, we use it a lot on their phones, but I think we're kind of still in the like wallets and exchanges are the apps that most people have on their phone. Um, Speaking of different blockchain use cases, this theme of this conference is disrupting the system. A couple months ago, we asked everybody, how are you reimagining the year now that in response to the shelter in place orders and event cancellations, trying to provide content for our community at a time when they were stuck at home. And it seems like the last 3 months, we've seen a lot more failure in our systems with the response to the pandemic, political issues at home and abroad, the economy. And I think a lot of people are tuning into the fact that these systems aren't working. So we are asking all our interviewees, what blockchain use cases are you most excited about, or you think have the most potential to fix or disrupt or change our systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, looking at the COVID times, right? I think that people are questioning the monetary policy for the first time in a long time. I would say that up until COVID and the Federal Reserve printing $2.3 trillion in COVID relief, the mass majority of people, especially in the United States, have never questioned the monetary system. So I think just inherently by having this happen, it's starting to ignite a lot of curiosity about what it means to own a US dollar. What does it mean to print money at the Federal Reserve? What are the long-term ramifications of this? And I genuinely believe that we are now starting to organically, as a like not our crypto community, but in the United States specifically, especially in relation to the money printing, I think we're actually starting to look into solutions to hedge against the dollar. And I think that this is the first time that I've ever heard so many common consumers literally ask that question. How does the dollar work and how can I hedge against it? So I think that we're looking at a bright future. And I think that it's starting to ramp up in a way that it hasn't in a really long time. You know, we've been talking about pro Bitcoin. We've been talking about pro blockchain for a long time. These are the use cases. This is what's up. But until people start to actually question the monetary system, until people start to understand what their dollar is, I think we'll still be sort of in this phase where we're working to build something up. I have high hopes for what's going to happen next now that people are actually starting to look at monetary policy. I know that there are a lot of blockchains that can be used on an everyday basis that are going to help people. A really good example of one, and I just like using COVID as a use case because it's such an interesting time where a lot of problems needed to be tackled very quickly. VChain was actually distributing KN95 masks, right? So there were KN95 masks that were being distributed all over the world on VChain blockchain. And I thought that was a really interesting use case, especially for what's going on right now. And more stuff where you can actually track distribution, make sure that what you have is legitimate. I think that that kind of use case is going to be really strong moving forward.
Yeah, because I think there was some concern about counterfeit masks, right? That weren't actually going to provide the protection that people thought they were when they purchased them. So they were able to track it on VChain.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, to wrap up here, I wanted to ask just a fun question. I know you produce music videos, and I saw in one of your videos you talked about, content creation and consumer culture and music being such a good way to communicate ideas because it gets stuck in your head, right? So, wondering if you have any earworms right now. I'll say mine. I finally saw Hamilton because it came on Disney Plus, and now all I hear in my head is Hamilton songs, and I have to listen to the soundtrack a lot to try to get it out. Any current earworms for you?
Oh man. I'm not sure particularly. I'm like a mixed music kind of person. So like that musical background, my father's actually a record producer. My mom was a classical pianist, and I'm a lyricist. So I'm all over the place. I'll be honest. I don't think I have anything stuck in my head except for maybe that like Rose's remix, the really electric one. But nothing that's really bounding at me recently. I have been looking at making some more Bitcoin songs, but that's like a rollout process.
Yeah, I can't wait to see more of those. Any podcasts or books that you're digging right now that you would recommend to our community?
Yeah, one that I always say is great, Bitcoin Standard, anything by Andreas Antonopoulos as well. If you're looking for specifically podcast content, I always recommend Scott Cunningham, Scott C Business. His videos are super, super accessible, and he really talks about what's going on in the blockchain space. Those are the people that I really pay attention to.
Yeah, awesome. The one I like anything having to do with how technology is affecting us. So I've been listening to the Rabbit Hole one by the Times, and then Tristan Harris from the Center for Humane Technology has one called Your Undivided Attention. And the first episode is about casinos and slot machine design, and they make a parallel between slot machine design and addictive the addictiveness of them to how social media interfaces have been developed. And it's really interesting to see the design principles are pretty much the same, you know? But yeah, thank you so much for hopping on and telling us more about your work in crypto. I know you do Finally Fridays and you're on Twitter. So I want to let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Crypto Finally and YouTube at Crypto Finally. You'll find more of my educational content and sort of talks about the community on YouTube, but I'm very active on Twitter if you just want to keep up on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Finally followed you. So I'm looking forward to seeing all your content and any new music videos you dropped. Thank you again, Rachel Siegel from Crypto Finally, for joining us. And we'll be back with more from Reimagine 2020.
Thank you.